Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We're all here, as usual, Victoria Glover, Wilfred Rocha, and myself, to have one of our fascinating weekly discussions. And today the conversation is about, are you okay? So Victoria is bringing some lived experience of grief and loss and struggling with being okay. And Will is bringing his usual incredible depth of wisdom and insight in all things, but also he was a mental health counselor for 40 years, so he's got quite a lot of experience around what gets in the way of people feeling okay and talking about it. And then, of course, I'm a grief coach, and very kindly, Victoria's handed me the baton today of hosting the show. So very happy to do that. I'm very honoured. Basically, when it comes to the impetus for Are You OK Day, so often we're just getting on with our days, got our heads down, and very much being in busyness and productivity and not really noticing how people around us are doing. And yet, very often people aren't actually behaving in ways that we're familiar with. We could notice if we just looked up and thought about it for a minute. And this is something that happened to the person who founded Are You OK Day, which is on Thursday, the 14th of September, is that his father committed suicide. And in the aftermath, he was reflecting about the fact that there were probably signs and nobody ever asked the question, are you okay? The thing is that we all do it tough sometimes, and people are struggling with life, particularly now. You know, the world is experiencing unprecedented levels of turmoil and uncertainty. And many of us have tasted, some for the first time, the pain of loss and grief, or struggling with anxiety and stress, and feeling quite alone with it all. So really just thought it would be a very good idea for us to have a conversation this week around this, because it's very much a flavour of something that people are having to deal with temperatures at record levels, interest rates going up, salaries not, people going through really dark days, and suicides are actually also at record levels. So Victoria, you recently went through a horrific time, losing 4 close family members, and then prior to that, I think that you had an accident and were quite disabled and feeling quite suicidal around things. And I wondered, did you speak up about the struggle that you were in?
Thank you for asking that question, Petra. This is a very like you said, it was a very, very difficult time prior to me losing my family members, like you said recently. Prior to that, I had an injury, and that injury was so severe that I was told that I was going to live the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And as at that time, I could not do anything on my own. I was dependent on others doing everything for me, everything. I couldn't even lift a cup of tea, let alone do anything. And so to see myself being going through that difficulty at that time, it got to a point where I just thought I have to go through that for almost a year. It got to a point where I realized that I just don't know if I want to live again, and I didn't know that life would be worth it. Let me put that into context for our viewers who are listening at the moment. As at that time, I was the only family member of who is living overseas, and from our cultural background, you can see the expectations and the and all the things that people are looking up to you for. And so as a result, I could not bring myself into the realization that my dreams of coming to this beautiful country and all of that has come crashing, and I don't know what to live for. So I was very suicidal. I was very, very suicidal. I got to a point where I have to get um, um, people checking on me very, very often to make sure that I don't harm myself. All sort of things were going through my mind, living overseas and all of this stuff. Now,
Gosh, I'm hearing there was a lot of shame there.
There was a lot of. What did you say? There was a lot of. You were hearing a lot
shame. A feeling of shame. You had a lot of responsibility and burdens to carry.
Yes, it's good you pointed that out. Shame was very high on the agenda because then, as at that time, I was doing very well. I had a good job. Everything was going well for me, and then all of a sudden, all of that came crashing. So there was a shame there. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to tell anybody that this is what I was going through.
Right.
And so
that is often the thing. Yeah.
that's what it was. And I was feeling guilty at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a terribly painful experience, Victoria. So, Will, I mean, in terms of your experience in people struggling with issues and then reaching out for help, I mean, does this get in their way a lot, shame?
I would say so. I think, there is that broader stigma attached to mental health or having mental health challenges, and finding, a sympathetic response either to those nearest and dearest to you or in wider society. I certainly always recall in various workspaces, and this is over a significant period of time, that mental health challenges were routinely viewed as in negative terms, and in terms of the operation of a particular organization or business, the priority seemed to be in removing the individual concerned because they had mental health challenges and have been open about it. So there's almost a culture of silence in terms of disclosing, and we see that on a regular basis across different spaces in Australia and elsewhere. And it's really a question for me of how do we find a circuit breaker.
Do you think things have shifted since the pandemic when, we were always happy to say, oh, we've got a physical condition, we need to go to the doctor. But it seemed that during the pandemic, there was more of a sort of acceptance of the fact that people were struggling with stress, anxiety, aloneness, disconnection. And there wasn't any shame in that. There was actually a real lived experience that we could finally start sort of put on the table and talk about. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, mine is a particularly, I guess it's not perhaps atypical because I acquired certain skills as a former Lifeline telephone counsellor and supervisor, which gave me a different perspective in terms of how to handle these questions, and how to be present for people. And I don't think that those skills, I think the absence of those skills has actually perhaps been amplified, and we're still in the pandemic, have actually been amplified, the absence of support, the inadequacies of the mental health system across Australia, the lack, certainly my anecdotal understanding in terms of talking to people on the phone was that there was a great dissatisfaction with those services that were out there, with psychologists, with psychiatrists, with the focus on using pharmaceutical drugs to treat human distress, which I guess if you take a moment to think about it is not particularly logical, but there you go.
And back
so
to
I think it exposed.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it also just showed the importance of our of how a sense of connection amongst us, not sort of pathologizing it and sending it out to health professionals, but actually being in community with this and normalizing it can be so incredibly powerful. Yeah.
Yes.
Victoria, when you you felt this enormous shame about letting the family down with your accident, which is just so heartbreaking, that you were here with such a will to help and to contribute, and yet you sort of turned that against yourself a little. When you lost your family members recently, I think that, again, you struggled a bit to reach out and say, I'm struggling, I need help, I need support. You kind of really kept it in. So what was that about? Because that wasn't shame, was it? That was something else.
No, it wasn't. It was something else. taking you back to the first episode where I had the injury, I didn't tell my family back home that I had that injury and that I wasn't going to work. I just couldn't bring myself to make them feel that heaviness of what is going on. So I didn't talk about it. I kept it, and I was in a very severe pain. So what I wanted to do, being suicidal, I just wanted to I don't want to live anymore. I find myself in front of a moving car that was speeding towards me. I just couldn't care less. For some reason, the driver didn't hit me. He came this close, so close, and came to a halt. He was just looking at me. I was just frozen. I don't know what it was like, an experience. You are there, but you're not there. You
dissociate.
You don't know what is going on. I couldn't care less. And the driver was, ooh, I don't care. And then he finally got into his car and he left. And I was just standing standing there and looking at him, and he left. And so recently, when my 4 of my family members died within 3 months, 3 of them really hit me. And even today, I don't know what was going on, because I had a blow up. And then yesterday I was watching a program on ABC where they were talking about the Australian story, where I thought, that's it. That's exactly what it was. Someone was talking about the moral injury that people sustain during the course of adversity and tragedies, that I didn't know what that was. Previously, when I was seeing a psychologist and psychiatrist, I didn't know that this is mental health. Literally, from my culture point of view, you can't even mention that, because when they said mental health, it really means something really serious. So you don't want to talk about it. So the shame of not talking about it is one thing, and also letting other people down was another thing. So you kind of want to keep it in, so that you for some reason you feel like you will be able to handle it. You'll be able to handle it until it's getting to a point where it's eating into the people around you and the people that you encounter, that you realize that something is going on. But I wouldn't want to talk about it. I just hide away, not wanting to talk about it. And I remember that Petra was one of the people who reached out when I was, and she happened to reach out on a very bad day. I couldn't talk to her. There was no way. I couldn't talk to her. I was really in a bad place. Yeah.
I remember. Yeah. But so what I'm hearing, Victoria, is that alongside the shame are 2 other things. The one is not wanting to burden the people who you're talking to with just how painful it is. It's actually hard to do that. And then the other one is actually also finding it almost inexpressible. It's really, really hard to kind of articulate what might be going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so before you move on to your next point, so we are talking about, are you okay there? Or someone asking you, how are you? Oh, I'm all right. You know, if I'm sitting here smiling, you wouldn't know that I'm going through that level of intense injury, emotionally, psychologically, physically. You wouldn't know. And I could be smiling just like anybody in the supermarket. You wouldn't know. That is when I realized that the moral injury that they were talking about, it's mostly the people who are within the short proximity who will be able to actually feel it. And even sometimes those people will need to have the education to know that this is what is happening and I need to reach out.
So what I understand from what you're saying about a moral injury is that there's no sincerity really in the inquiry. Are you okay? Needs to mean something. So I wondered, well, we talked a little bit before the session started, before we started recording, about that connection, that real sense of being interested and listening. I wondered if you want to talk a little bit around what is it to presence yourself to somebody else's story and actually ask, are you okay, and mean it?
Well, I think the actually not asking or not asking the question in a direct way is actually a way of assisting presence, because I think by asking questions, you shift unintentionally the focus to yourself. And I think really what it is about is that these things sort of come up indirectly. You know, it's to have the knowledge in terms of the signs to educate yourself before you can actually step into that space, and to have those skills, which they don't teach, is rarely taught unless you walk into a space like Lifeline, which is how to listen.
How do we do that? How do we really listen?
Well, it's seeing, it's understanding the benefits for yourself. It's perhaps, and I would always recommend from my own direct experience, that people actually attend a Lifeline course, because their approach, and it's been, you know, the years that I was there, it was refined. They used to have a model, and then they had another approach, all about facilitating, not intervening into or poking your nose into people's business, but creating the circumstance where people could genuinely feel that they were actually being listened to. And part of that is, you know, having a toolkit in terms of probing, but without doing so in an obtrusive manner. And it's, you know, the skill of challenging the story that someone's telling you, so that you can actually listen. I mean, there are courses, I think it's called for accidental counselling. So I think there's a weight of responsibility, or weight of responsibility. There's a responsibility on you as an individual to seek out, and obviously this particular episode is going to be helpful in that respect. You know, seek out a Lifeline course, seek out an accidental counselling course, because you will run into people. I mean, it happened to me the other day, and I didn't realise. I didn't need to realise, but the person that I was speaking to in a business situation, you know, I was buying a coffee, and they were actually referring to their mental health state. And so, you know, I listened and was able to respond without questions, and work with that person in that 10-minute period. I mean, it helped that they were sort of familiar with me, but it was really interesting because it was in a public setting. And it wasn't something I was expecting. It wasn't but I wasn't fazed by it. I was accepting of that person's desire to talk.
So I'm hearing that there's, you know, part of it is get out of your own way. In other words, don't be presencing yourself of I want to know a story, but truly being present to the fact that somebody seems to have something going on, and just being genuinely interested. And at the same time, you know, I wanted to just sort of add to this. You know, we all actually have an innate capacity for listening and connection. And sometimes we tend to think that we don't really have that skill, and we need to get it from somewhere. And I'm also wondering to what extent it's that we're worried about what we'll hear. What happens when this information comes to us? What will we do with it? Will we be able to respond? Will we actually be helpful? Will we be challenged and triggered ourselves?
I think there is an interesting process that you go through when and I put myself in a particularly specialized setting, but there is I did have the capacity to separate from what I was hearing. I don't know if it was, you know, to do with my character, the things that I'd learned over the years. but I really didn't take some of the stories, that I heard. I can recall them now, but not in a traumatic. It's not traumatic for me to recall it. But I could leave it in because it wasn't my story. So that was a really important recognition, that often it's not, I mean, we can see some resonance for us in what someone is saying to us. But to recognize that it's actually not your story is the most powerful gift that you can give to the person.
I love the way you said that. Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So Victoria, what do you think, what one would be looking for, knowing that you've carried so much, that sort of alert us to the fact that something might be wrong? How do we know if somebody is struggling? What would you say to that?
That's a very loaded question. Sometimes I think you will only know if the person wants you to know. It depends. Sometimes also you will have to have the knowledge to know what signs to look for. If someone is invading you, you ask a question and they just give you a general answer and then quickly turn back to another question sort of look. Those are some of the things. If someone is very sociable, and all of a sudden they are withdrawn, like personal for me, I just withdraw. I didn't even answer my phone. Text messages are not replied to. I just, most of the time, just said I'll get back to you. And if you know me personally, you will know, maybe that's not the sort of person she is. Maybe, is there anything, you see, this is where it gets a little bit more tricky. You don't want to be too nosy. And at the same time, sometimes you want the person to let you in before you can, move to the next level. But sometimes the person doesn't let you in. So sometimes it's just a matter of probing. For example, someone I know on LinkedIn just asked me one question and I just burst into tears. I was crying the whole day. I couldn't answer the question immediately because she actually hit the nail on the head straight away. So here I am. I'm confronted. I have to say something. If I go this way, she's going to get me. If I go this way, she's going to get me. The same thing happened when Petra asked me a question and I'm like, oh, say, how are you? I said, I'm all right, which is, no, I'm all right. And then she asked me, are you really all right? You sound a little bit down. I thought, oh my God, I thought I kind of tried to, but she kind of sensed it straight away. And she said, oh, you sound a little bit, is everything okay? What's going on? So she just follow up with questions. So for me, if you ask me, how do we know? I think we have to find a way of asking questions that have a follow-up questions, that if we ask the first question and the person is not able to, the follow-up question will not be too intruding, but at the same time, we'll be able to get the person to say something. And then maybe out of that, you could say something else. And then also in terms of behavior sort of thing, we have to be able to be on the lookout, especially for the people that we really care about. It's really important.
Well, what I heard you say was that you went out of connection. You didn't answer the phone. You didn't answer text messages.
Myself.
You stepped back. And what really helped was somebody getting into connection, and not necessarily in a very heavy way, but just really presencing themselves and kind of trying to recreate that sense of, we have something to say, we have common interests. And that really the biggest sign, therefore, of something going on is when somebody gets out of connection, because that's something that's always flowing around all of us, isn't it? And it's so important to all of us.
Yeah, that is what it means. It's someone asking that question, asking in a way, the person is saying that I'm here, I care, how can I help? It's up to you to let me come in and provide some help. Even if it's not enough, I just want you to know that I'm here. And you can both attest to this situation. Will, you know how much I bombarded you when I was just freaking out every day? I was angry, I was stressed, I was exhausted, all the emotions you can think about was going on. But it takes you to believe in someone that you know can absorb or can handle such a situation before you can confide in them. So if that relationship is not already there, you can't just open up to anybody just for the sake of it. It has to
The
be,
trust has to be, the trust has to be
trust
there.
has to be there. And because I trusted both of you, I was able to let you in into what is going on. And that also gives you the opportunity to be able to help me on my journey. And that is profound. And so you can imagine if the trust is not there, I would just say, I'm all right, I'm going okay, everything is good, it's business as usual, close that door, never get in. So the trust building is very important. Building that relationship.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it is, and it's not. You know, in situations, and that's the title of the accidental. I have never done that course, but accidental counselors, that we often find ourselves in situations just as that require trust. And how do you have trust in an emergency? And so I guess the thing is to have the skill to not make it about yourself, but to be able to sit with distress and with pain, and to know the difference in terms of your own journey, and that in itself is an act of friendship, and it's an act of solidarity with
and
another
trust
human
building.
being. Yeah,
and trust building.
Yeah, not with you. Sort of. I never think. I would think, or I would reflect afterwards, but in the moment, I wouldn't be thinking about trust, because perhaps I have that perspective that I'm a trustworthy person. But it is a value that is we sort of we might think is a default. It's there, so we can then proceed. It's then safe to proceed.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not.
We don't necessarily have to have a trusted person that we're telling. In actually asking somebody and meaning it, and somebody responding and saying, okay, well, you know, this is actually a bit difficult at the moment. The trust is actually a thing that is growing then, and facilitates the conversation going deeper and deeper. And sometimes we kind of wait for trust to be there before we start, rather than understanding that it's part of the process. Is that the more that you are present to someone, and the more that somebody's vulnerable, the more the trust between you is building naturally.
Yes. Can I add to what you both said? You know, there's a saying that you can't see the picture if you're in the frame. And then there's also the saying that you can't see the frame if you're in the picture. So that same quotation, if you flip it, is both ways. It's like a two-edged sword. So if I'm the one who is struggling, and I put myself in the picture that I don't want you in, I can see that there is a help out there if I don't let somebody in to help me. The same way, if you are coming in to help me, if you put yourself in the picture, you're not gonna see me, or you're not gonna be able to identify what I'm going through. So yes, we don't want to be in the picture if we are in the frame, but we don't want to be the frame when we are in the picture. We should be able to allow others to come in to help. At the same time, we have to, the person who is coming in to help should also present himself in a way that he will get himself out of the way, and then it will be all about you. Then the person can be able to listen, just like Will was saying, to listen and listen very deeply about what it is that the person is saying, where they are coming from. And then you can also come out with a solution or an advice. If it is bigger than you, then you can always refer them to someone else higher than you. But then at least you have provided the initial stage for the person to step in.
Yeah, I think that we should definitely touch on what happens, you know, once you've actually got that connection and you want to resource someone. But, you know, I just really think that it's also worth saying what a relief it is for a person to actually finally speak. I mean, Will and I both know this from, you know, the counselling that we've done, is when you finally actually get to say what it is that's going on. It's not that there's necessarily a solution. It's not like, here's the information, what do we do about it? But very often it's about being able to be present to your own experience, to be able to name those feelings, to have somebody else really get how that is for you, and maybe sometimes to just be in the unknowingness of the situation and not have to do that alone. You know? So I think that it's also a really important part of being prepared to sort of speak about it. Is, you know, two heads is better than one, and it does help, you know, to really kind of get it out of yourself.
And listening with respect, you know, it's interesting that I just recalled a friend of mine who was talking about one of their parents, and seemingly just made a comment about the parent going into an aged facility. And if I didn't, you know, I've known that particular friend for 8 years or something. If I didn't know her better, I would have missed that.
Yeah.
And it's the cadence in the voice, it's the context, it's a whole series of things, which, you know, for me might be naturally there, but have been sharpened with those years and in Lifeline and other situations of not jumping in, of not asking questions, of not saying, oh, I'm not making assumptions, of just hearing it. And maybe, you know, I didn't actually make, maybe I did, you know, might have said something along the lines of that's challenging, because, you know, both the person's parents have lived independently into their 9th decade, which is a huge achievement. But it's witnessing that relationship between parent and the situation was different for me with my parents, but witnessing that and doing that with respect.
Yeah, such a beautiful word, witnessing. You know, when we're asking someone, how are you okay? We don't have to do something about it. Just witnessing is such a gift.
And that's being present, because you actually say, you're not actually, it's not. And the other word, the other thing for us to be aware of is that we actually have 5 senses and more.
Intuition, and transpersonal knowing, all those things. Yes.
Yeah, so we actually are very knowledgeable, and we can be very knowledgeable and skilled without realizing it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I want to add to what you're both saying again. Asking someone, are you okay? It doesn't necessarily mean that you are personally okay. You don't have to be okay to ask someone if they are okay. And I'll give you an example. When my sister was accidentally killed in front of my younger sister, the one who followed me, who does she reach out to? She have to reach out to me. So here we are both struggling in terms of what is going on and trying to make sense of it all. But the impact that it has on my sister, my younger sister, was massive. Now here I am trying to make sense of it all, and then I have to also be there for my younger sister who is looking up to me for strength. And so for me to ask her if she's okay, and to ask her if everything is going okay, what can I do to help, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm personally okay. But then at some point in time, somebody have to step up and lead in the direction of where do we go from here? What is the best thing to do? What can we leave behind? What can we focus on? Somebody have to be able to guide you in terms of what you need to do. And for me to be able to provide that safety net for my younger sister and say, don't worry, we are in this together. We will get through it together and everything is going to be all right. To the extent that she can't even sit in her room because she said, this is where we were just sitting just a couple of hours ago. This is where she was sitting. And so for her to go back into the room, she feels as though my big sister is sitting there. So how do you kind of take her out of that scene on a regular basis? So what I'm trying to say here is that if you are waiting to be okay before you can ask someone if they are okay, you might miss the point. And so
such a good point.
The little room you have, the little strength you have left, use it to save somebody or to dig someone out of their misery and be able to provide that shoulder for them to cry on.
So misery loves company. this actually, though, you know, I mean, I think people really feel a sense of empathy, you know, and a deeper connection sometimes when they're carrying similar things. And it'd be amazing actually in a conversation how often you find that what you're struggling with and haven't really sort of articulated is something somebody else is. And just, you know, being prepared to articulate it for yourself gives them permission to say it for themselves too. And it's incredibly powerful.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
So just before, you know, we close the show then, could we just sort of talk about, so how are we going to resource a person once we've heard how they're going, you know, to do the next thing that would, is it enough to just talk, or do we need to suggest anything or take some kind of responsibility ourselves? Do either of you have any thoughts on that?
I will
I think,
personally
no, go on.
advocate that mental health education should be part of our everyday language and part of our everyday learning, because you don't want to wait until something happened to you before you said, oh, all of a sudden, yeah, I'm interested in the topic. Because what I realized is that when tragedy and adversity present itself to you, that is when you get to know that you have to dig deep to be able to get through. And there are a lot of things that I have learned along the way now that if I had learned them earlier, maybe it would have prepared me. But most of the time, nothing can prepare you, even though we know that at some point, someone is going to pass, you're going to pass, or anything else. But when that really happened right in front of you, you are never prepared enough. You are never prepared enough. So what I want to say is that mental health education should be part of everyday conversation. And we should strive to educate our family members, our children, our partners, and people, even at the workplace, to make that part of our everyday life. And that will go a long way to help society and to heal us slowly. And also, the moral injury that a lot of people are carrying is not visible. And so until we ask the right question, we may never know who is hurting and who is not.
Yeah. Will, were you going to say something there?
Well, I think the thing is that what's important is to, and it goes back to this point, my point about senses, is to trust your gut instinct. And that's something that is actually underplayed, not by me, but you know, you have a thought or a feeling about a person and a situation, and you think, oh, I really should, you know, maybe check in on them, or it's actually something that I do myself with friends I haven't seen for a while. I actually say, I'm just checking in with you, see how you are. Or I might start the email with, you know, I hope you're well at the moment. I hope all's well at the moment. And I do get responses to say, you know, and some of them are quite surprising or shocking. That, you know, if you haven't heard from somebody for a while, they've had a loss, or you know, they're going through some difficulty in the workspace. So there are ways of demonstrating your availability to be there as a support, without actually asking questions. You're not actually asking a question. You're just saying, I'm checking in, or, you know, how's it going? Or not even how's it going. I don't like that, but something it's sort of very subtle, put it that way. And it's really graded to the relationship that you have with the person. So we have a lot in our tool. I'll go back to that point about toolkits. We've got a lot in terms of our life lived experiences that we can draw on. And sometimes we need to perhaps sharpen that through doing a Lifeline course or an accidental counselling course if we feel that that's something that works for us, but also reflecting on the fact that we've also got lived experiences that can be brought into play discreetly without actually overwhelming the person.
I mean, I'd say some of the other things in the toolkit are genuine care and interest in other people. Not being afraid of not knowing or not having the answers, more being afraid of being out of connection with people and leaving them alone. And, you know, just a real sense of your own humanity in a situation as well. So, you know, just kind of summarizing then, you know, it is about bringing curiosity and compassion It is about asking the question. It is about being prepared to extend yourself a little. And then at the end of the, asking and listening is very much about checking in again afterwards, I think you said, and making sure that you found out how are things now? Are things still tough? Finding other ways to resource people by not leaving them alone is really the big takeaway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
And we can't see the picture, the big picture, if we are in the frame. And that is very important. We have to let people in and allow them to help us. Sometimes asking for help is very difficult, but we should make the effort to seek help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been such an interesting conversation, and I do hope that it's helped people to think a bit more about that it doesn't cost a lot to reach out. It can make such a difference, and it's all part of being human and being connected. And that they're just these 4 simple things to do that they ask you to do on Are You OK Day. Ask, listen, encourage some kind of action, and then check in again afterwards. So do hope that this has been helpful to everybody who's listened, and we'd love to have your comments when you've seen this video, hear how this has gone for you, and if you have any thoughts and ideas you'd like to share. So thank you very much, both Will and Victoria. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you for your hosting skills. It's been wonderful talking to you both. God bless.
Thank you. Everybody, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.